Hollywood has often presented Teyana Taylor as a powerful and talented artist who can succeed in many different creative fields. She has worked in music, acting, and visual storytelling, showing that she is capable of much more than just one role. Over time, she has received praise, major opportunities, and built a strong public image that feels carefully planned and controlled. She has even won a Golden Globe and taken on important acting roles, gaining early attention for awards like the Oscars. From the outside, her career looks like a clear example of success, filled with recognition, visibility, and access to big platforms. However, beneath this polished image, there is a more complex story. It is not only about success but also about control. Even though Hollywood has given her many opportunities, one important thing has remained difficult for her to fully achieve: complete creative freedom. According to Katt Williams, this is not just a coincidence. He believes that the industry's cautious attitude toward her may be connected to this very issue. The situation began to change when Teyana moved from being in front of the camera to working behind it. Before that, she fit into a familiar system. She was a performer whose talent could be shaped and guided by others. But once she started making her own creative choices, her role changed. She was no longer just part of someone else's story. She began to control the story itself. In an industry that relies heavily on hierarchy and strict control, this kind of shift can make a big difference. Katt Williams suggests that the concern is not about her behavior or public image. Instead, it is about what she knows and what she might reveal. In his commentary, he explains that the industry does not push people aside simply because they are difficult to work with. It does so when they become unpredictable, and more importantly, when they become informed. There is a big difference between someone being called difficult and someone being seen as dangerous. A difficult person may cause inconvenience, but a dangerous one has the power to challenge systems that depend on silence. To better understand why Teyana's position is so unique, it helps to look at how her career developed. Hollywood often encourages people to specialize. Artists are usually expected to stay within one role, such as being only a singer or only an actor. This structure creates dependency, making sure that artists must rely on powerful industry figures for approval, funding, and opportunities. Teyana did not follow this usual path. As a teenager growing up in Harlem, she was discovered by Pharrell Williams, which introduced her to high-level creative networks at a very young age. She even worked on choreography for Beyoncé early in her career, showing not just talent but also access to important connections. Her journey continued when she signed with Kanye West. At that time, his influence extended far beyond music into fashion, art, and branding. Being part of his creative environment meant more than just making songs. It gave her a chance to observe how influence is built and maintained. She watched how deals were made, how careers were lifted, and how others were quietly pushed aside. While the public saw her as a performer, she was learning much more behind the scenes. She gained knowledge about contracts, timing, power, and negotiation, which later shaped her growth. Before achieving major recognition, she faced a turning point that revealed the limits of her position. She announced her retirement from music, surprising many fans. Media reports described it as creative differences, but that simple explanation likely hid deeper issues. In reality, she had reportedly asked several times to be released from Def Jam recordings, but her requests were denied. What seemed like a personal decision was actually a struggle between an artist seeking freedom and a system unwilling to let go of control. Katt Williams has pointed to this moment as an example of how the industry works. Her retirement was not just stepping away. It was more like being forced to pause due to contracts and resistance from the system. By the time she was finally released, the delay had already affected her career momentum. In entertainment, timing is extremely important, and even short interruptions can change the direction of a career. Instead of disappearing, she adapted. She turned her attention to film and visual storytelling, where she could have more control over her work. This marked a major shift. She was no longer waiting to be chosen. She was creating her own opportunities. By 2024, discussions about control in the entertainment industry became more open, partly because voices like Katt Williams were speaking out. In this context, Teyana's experiences started to make more sense. She was not an outsider criticizing the system. She was someone who had worked inside it and understood how it functioned. The difference between being a performer and a director became very important. Performers work within limits, with their image and work shaped by many layers of control. Directors, on the other hand, decide what the audience sees, what is left out, and how the story is told. This level of authority brings independence that the traditional system is not always comfortable with. Teyana Taylor's directorial debut, Get Light, represents this transformation clearly. With support from Paramount Pictures, the project reflects both her personal vision and her cultural background. It highlights stories and perspectives that have not always been widely represented. On paper, this should have been a major moment of celebration. It showed her growth as an artist and progress within the industry. However, the response has been quieter than expected. The film's release has slowed down, and promotion has not been as strong. While delays are common in filmmaking, the timing has raised questions. Around the same period, her reported breakup with Aaron Pierre was explained publicly as a result of busy schedules. On their own, these events may seem normal, but when viewed together, they add to a larger picture of challenges that go beyond what is visible on the surface. When all of these events are looked at together, they start to form a pattern that has led many people to ask questions. Hollywood has a long and well-known history of dealing with individuals who step outside of its usual rules, especially when it comes to Black women who gain influence in ways that are not easy to control. This pattern does not always appear suddenly. Instead, it often begins in a subtle way, through small changes in how a person is described in the media or within the industry. At first, certain words begin to appear more often. Someone might be called difficult, emotional, or hard to work with, even when there is no clear proof or source behind these claims. Over time, as these descriptions are repeated again and again, people start to accept them as truth. What begins as a suggestion slowly turns into a widely believed image. This shift in narrative can have a strong impact on a person's reputation and career. This kind of situation has affected other well-known figures in the past. For example, Monique and Taraji P. Henson have both faced similar challenges, although their experiences were different in detail. In each case, attention was moved away from larger issues within the system and placed instead on their personal behavior. This shift makes it easier to avoid discussing deeper problems and keeps the focus on the individual rather than the structure around them. In the case of Teyana Taylor, the situation may go even further. According to Katt Williams, she is not just speaking out for fair treatment or better opportunities. The suggestion is that she understands the inner workings of the industry in great detail. This includes how contracts are designed, how money is shared, and what artists are expected to give up in order to succeed. If this idea is true, then the situation changes completely. It is no longer just about handling someone's personality. Instead, it becomes about controlling what that person knows and what they might reveal. Knowledge, in this context, can be powerful and even risky. Throughout history, film has often been used as a quiet way to express ideas that cannot be spoken openly. Directors can use storytelling, symbolism, and visual style to share deeper meanings without saying everything directly. This has been especially important in Black cinema, where directly challenging powerful systems has sometimes led to serious consequences. Because of this, filmmakers have learned to communicate messages in creative and layered ways. A director who not only has creative control, but also understands how the industry works from the inside holds a unique position. That combination can be very influential. Teyana Taylor now finds herself in that position. She is no longer just performing in someone else's project. She is creating her own work and shaping the message herself. However, her film Get Light has still not been released, and its future remains unclear. At the same time, Katt Williams continues to speak openly about these topics, and audiences are paying close attention. The lack of clear communication from the industry has only made people more curious. In situations like this, silence can send its own message. When no explanation is given, it often leads others to wonder what might be happening behind the scenes. The main question is not whether Teyana Taylor understands how the system works. Based on her experience, it is very likely that she does. The more important question is whether the industry is ready for how she might use that knowledge. This is not an easy question to answer. Systems that depend on control are usually not comfortable showing weakness or admitting their limits. Being open and transparent would challenge the way they maintain power. Teyana Taylor's journey, therefore, is about more than success or recognition. It represents a deeper change. She has moved from simply taking part in the system to having the ability to shape it. She has seen how stories are created, how influence is built, and how people are placed within larger systems. Now, as she continues working behind the camera, she has the chance to change those stories. She is no longer just appearing in them. She is the one creating them. This shift from being part of the story to being the storyteller is powerful, and it may also be the most challenging step she has taken so far.